Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, and welcome all to the session today for the pre-foundation. And for the session today, we have Dr. Vanessa Barros with us. Good evening, Dr. Vanessa.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invite. So, before we start, I will briefly introduce Dr. Vanessa to all of you. So, Dr. Vanessa Barros is a writer, senior executive personal advisor, executive trainer, and a researcher on diversity and inclusion. She holds a Master of Science in Management from
Recording in progress.
from ETech Business School in France. He has led diverse teams for over 20 years in the field of advertising, where she has worked with global brands across the world in Europe, North America, South America, Asia, and worked with brands such as Procter and Gamble, Lolita, Kraft Foods, Unilever, and other many more. Her multicultural experience with these brands led her to pursue a PhD at NTU Singapore, in which she focused on the strategies adopted by senior international executives to manage intercultural conflicts effectively. She has written a book, Don't Mess with My Professionalism, which was published by Penguin Random House in 2020. Currently, she is also visiting faculty at ESEC Business School in Sergi, Singapore, and Rabat, also in Velric Business Schools, and also in IMT Ghaziabad. He has been teaching international marketing to students of PGTM of dual country program, both in IMT Dubai, in IMT Ghaziabad campus. We are honored to have her today to deliver the pre-foundation session on the topic cultural intelligence, the soft skill behind business performance. Thank you, Dr. Vanessa, again for joining us. We welcome you to the session, and I would request you to take it further from here.
Thank you very, very much for your very kind introduction, and welcome everyone. When we talked with INT about the topic that we would cover, we discussed something that would be broad enough that it would be useful to all of you across disciplines, across specializations. And therefore, that's the topic that we chose, cultural intelligence, because really, in today's global world, with the opening of the Indian economy, and when you look at the 500 top brands in the world, only very few are coming from India still, and Tata is one of them, and now Jaguar since the acquisition. That being said, there's still a lot that we can all learn from each other, and this soft skill is going to be critical for all of us. Let's start with a little video.
I think ma'am, are you playing a sound?
Yes, it's not working?
No, the sound is not working.
Can I ask you, why would that? But you can hear me fine. I know why. Sorry. It's my fault. Apologies. Now it should work.
Das hier ist ein Mindset. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät fürs Gedächtnis. Das Gerät, das Überlebensradar. So, this is the German Coast Guard. So, I'm thinking about.
So language and lack of cultural intelligence can be very detrimental for life and for business in general. So that's what we're going to talk about. It's also very useful when you have an international gang such as myself. So here is my British, French, Portuguese, and Dutch family. The four nationalities are very helpful when it comes to the global soccer tournaments, and it creates a variety of perspectives, of family origins, and family cultures that need to be dealt with on a constant basis. I would like you to go to your phones, please, for me, and type menti.com and record this code in order to tell me 3 values that matter most to you.
Sorry, we can't see the.
Can you now see the screen with your responses coming up? Integrity, honesty, empathy, humility, perseverance, discipline, hard work. Now, I kept my question extremely broad, and so some of you might have answered this related to professional settings. Some others might have answered to you in terms of like personal settings, life in general. What is very interesting with the values that you see appear on screen is that these values don't mean the same thing across the world. So that would be maybe a first big learning for you, is to realize that things that you think are obvious are not. Let me give you the notion of honesty or integrity. There are cultures that are much more individualistic than others, where the worth of the individual is completely individual. Nobody can take that worth from you. When you come from such a culture, integrity is about saying what you think, fighting for your own thoughts, regardless of what the others might be believing. When you come from a very collectivist environment, integrity is actually saying what others want to hear. And a little child in Japan is brought up since they were born to juggle between what is expected from them to say in certain contexts and what is expected for them to say in other contexts. So everything becomes relative. But if you do that in a country like France, for instance, where I come from, you would be considered a coward because you are not being true to yourself. You're not defending the same thought one day and the other. Empathy. Depending on the degree of interdependence of the culture that you're in, empathy can be simply caring from a distance about somebody. And I was working on a podcast this morning. We are developing a podcast on cultural intelligence across marital situations. And one of the things that struck me when I met my British family is that they would never intervene. So one day there was a big issue in my family, and my expectation would have been for them to pick up the phone, call me, ask me if they could help or anything. But actually, in their culture, and that was that family, I'm not saying that it's all the British, but in that family, it was about not wanting to intrude. So what is empathy in that case? Is it not intruding, or is it really caring, giving you money, being loyal to you, etc., etc.? Hard work, what does it mean? Is it long hours? Is it focus? Is it so? I guess the first thing to realize is, number one, even within one given country, fair enough, one of the most populated and soon the most populated in the world, you've already got here, out of 100 people, a variety of important values that you're going to have to negotiate in the workplace, whether you do finance, whether you do marketing, whether you do human resources. If you work with somebody who's all about honesty and you actually believe in punctuality and discipline and resilience, maybe you're going to do things that this person will consider not to be within their values. And they're not maybe going to be punctual because, frankly, that has nothing to do with their what they believe is honesty, right? So all of these words are going to be very, very much part of your life. And I would encourage you to think really deeply about what are the 3 values that you want to use across your life to filter and make your decisions. So I'll stop sharing for a moment and I'll share my values. I have 3 values. And my 3 values are curiosity. I wouldn't be here today if I wasn't curious to meet a big crowd of brilliant students in a different country from mine. Generosity. I reached a stage in my life where I learned a lot already. I keep learning every day. And I like the idea that there is sharing. And any conversation that you and I might have, any question you would ask, to me is a present. It's an act of generosity where we engage with each other. We enrich each other with our differences. And finally, joy. If I don't have fun, I don't want to do it. We talked about my career a little bit. I also wanted to pass on another message. This map of the world is absolutely correct. If we all agree around this forum that the Earth is round, then there's no way of showing the Earth that would be incorrect. And so I would encourage you to use very different types of maps, where India is at the center, where Europe is at the center, where Africa is at the center, to realize suddenly what you look like in the face of the Earth. Too often have we been used to a Western version of the map, and that gives us all lessons of humility. We are not the only ones, and we're not the center of the world, any of us, right? We talked about the brands that I worked on. I worked mostly on fast consumer goods, so all the products that are sold in the supermarket, basically, and that gave me a tremendous breadth of opportunity because I would run accounts that were present in 80 plus countries, right? So brands that you might know of, the Coca-Cola company, several of their brands. You would certainly know some of the Procter & Gamble brands, Head and Shoulders, for instance. And the last brand that I worked on out of Singapore was Pond's by Unilever. Why is cultural intelligence so important in business? Well, when you deal with beauty, like I used to when I was doing Pond's, you need to understand what beauty means across the world. What are the criteria of beauty? What are the criteria of the define love? Because our claim was that with that cream, you would find love. Now, what does love mean across the world? If you don't know that, you're going to miss out on plenty of tremendous opportunities, marketing-wise. whoops. So let me just say a few words about cultural intelligence, and that's what we're here about to talk about. The ability to function effectively across cultural contexts, all of them. You need a lot of cultural intelligence to mingle amongst the incredible diversity and richness that you have in your own country, the incredible diversity of languages, of geographical differences, of ways to do business. Often you oppose North and South in India. Well, that would be a great example of different ways of portraying oneself, doing business, and maybe some variety of values. An alternative definition that I quite like is the capacity to detect cultural differences. Because the last thing I would want you to come out of this few moments we will have together is the notion that I'm going to teach you about how an Indian is, a French is, a Japanese is. That's the last thing we would want to know. What we want to know is that all of us have certain values in common or certain values that are not in common. And then when you detect that of an individual, you may adapt or not your behavior. Imagine that in the chat, most of you, if not all of you, greeted me with good evening, madam. Well, in my culture, some students in certain countries might say, hello, Vanessa. They could even go as far as calling me by my first name, which I believe would be very surprising for you. And yet that exists. Now, according to how I introduce myself, and if I say to you, my name is Vanessa Barros, call me Mrs. Barros, or call me Vanessa, or call me Dr. Barros, you would know what degree of hierarchy I believe in and I expect from you. So if I said, just call me Vanessa, chances are that I might be very democratic in my way of dealing with students or dealing with employees, and that I believe that actually we're quite equal in terms of hierarchy, regardless of the responsibilities we have. There's countries like the Netherlands that is extremely flat in terms of organization, where ministers would go to their offices by bicycle. Now, those same big shots going to suddenly to China and bringing the same bicycles to go to work would be told absolutely not ever do that again, because it would be almost disrespectful for the employees to not go with a prestigious car and show their status. So maybe stick with this image of some of us are squares, some of us are triangles, some of us are rounds, some of us are whatever shape we are. And rather than trying to round the square, square the round, let's try to find a third culture altogether. And that's what you, as great, inspiring business leaders in the workplace, will have to do, is to find the organizational culture where you can let everybody blossom with their differences. Because the big issue with not having differences in the way we behave and in the values we have and in the ways we believe in professionalism is that we will have groupthink. We will all convince ourselves of big mistakes because we all think alike. And that would be very detrimental to business. Or we're going to try to impose norms to our consumers, to our clients, to our suppliers that are absolutely irrelevant in a given context. So let's think about detecting the differences, managing those, and creating that third culture, okay, that helps us all, and knowing that we have all these differences to deal with. So, cultural differences. We'll talk about the visible ones, and those are the ones that you, as professionals, will have to deal with when you become CEOs, director generals, regional heads of any given business. You will have to know what are the social structures, the political environment, the legal, the education, religious, language systems, so that you can, for instance, develop your banking system. The banking system in the Muslim world has nothing to do with the banking system in the non-Muslim world. And there are beliefs in the Muslim religion that many of you of this belief would know, that you cannot lend money for profit. And therefore, there's an entire system of banking that was created to go around and avoid that barrier for what would make any financial institution worth living. Okay, so you do things differently. In marketing, I remember coming to Ghaziabad and we had a whole discussion about saving energy and how Procter & Gamble had come up with this new product that would allow for laundry to be done at a lower temperature. And half of the room says to me, but ma'am, we have machines that don't use temperature. Of course, some do, but most of them do not. Or to even talk about a washing machine in an environment, a rural environment, where electricity is not even always available, which would be the case in some areas of this world. And so we need to have that openness to understand that there's all these differences and that they affect the choices and the business we deal with. The subjective culture, that's the hidden part of the iceberg, are those values that I was telling you about earlier. Okay, those are the ones where you need to know who you are, you need to understand what the society you're in believes in, and therefore, what are the ways to manage. So when it comes to the national frameworks, I would say, these are the things that you need to keep in mind. What is going to be the legal system? What's going to be the political system? What's the marital system? What are the things? What are the things that you can talk about or not around the world? So, having this in mind, I would like all of you to do a little bit of research. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to look at today, June 1st, what is happening in the world, importantly for anybody, that could be useful to your business. Is there a specific event? Is there a specific commemoration? Is there something particular that might have happened? So I need you to Google a little bit and find what happens in this month of June that could be of importance to you anywhere in the world. Pride Month. Today is the 1st of June indeed, and we celebrate a date dates back from 1969, where a group of LGBT members of all genders, it's interesting to note that historically the event is remembered as a male gay event, but it wasn't. It was really across genders. And it was called the riots of Stonewall in Manhattan, New York City. Environment Day. So what is it that you can do with a Pride Month or with an Environment Day on the 5th of June? Well, maybe you're going to communicate about what is good about environment in your company. Maybe you're going to, if you think of the Pride Month, going to communicate about a part of the population or celebrate a part of the population. It doesn't mean that you are trying to sell things only to them, but you could just acknowledge that there is something about this circle, this community that is important. Yoga Day. Do you have something that you want to talk about? Health and wellness. Do you have anything related in your products or in your services or in your industry about such events? So let's be creative and think about all the things that could happen. Now you're giving me, I was hoping that you could give me as well some local traditional holidays from around the world, because here it's a bit of the Google westernized world of Western calendar. Try to do an exercise as well. Where is New Year around the world? And what dates of the year is New Year? And you'll see that all year long, you have a good reason to celebrate New Year. And all these, so if you don't mind putting the country name and the event that might happen in that country, if you can find something a bit unusual that would give you a perspective of a different outcome. It could also be, we were doing an international marketing with some of your peers at IMT, big campaigns of how to sell Indian brands abroad. Well, it could be that you try to sell to an Indian community abroad, but it could also mean that you celebrate things that happen in India and you make them known to the rest of the world. And today, with the globalization, a lot many more people know about typical holidays in India, which wasn't the case previously. You get a gist. So the more you know about what happens around the world, the more opportunities you will have to make business and to make good business. So this was Stonewall, the image of what happened in 1961. So let's talk about our differences. We talked about your values, and we saw many appearing on the screen. Why is it so important that we know about cultural differences and cultural value differences? Well, because there's only two reasons in life why you would get angry with anybody. It's if I threaten your identity, the person you are, by threatening your values, by not paying the respect you expect, then that's what will happen. And by, which would be the other one, by preventing you from doing a task that you set yourselves to do. Those are the moments where you get really mad at anybody else. Now think for just a few seconds, the last time you got aggravated with anybody, was it because someone was threatening your identity? Or was it because somebody was threatening what you wanted to achieve? If you want, you can answer in the chat. Very good question from Karen, as you think about your attention moments. Cultural intelligence actually includes emotional intelligence. Why? Emotional intelligence is the ability to manage, it's the ability to detect our own emotions, others' emotions, and to manage them accordingly. Now, what's the problem if you cross cultures with emotions? Well, go to Thailand and 70% of the smiles will not be a good sign. It's the country of smiles. Everybody smiles anyway. So emotional intelligence is going to be a subset and not the opposite of cultural intelligence. And cultural intelligence is emotional intelligence plus the knowledge of cultures that allows you to understand the cultures around the world. Self-respect, fair enough. Communication could be someone communicating to you in a rude way until you feel attacked as a person, or it could be unclear, and therefore it's your task that is unclear because you can't do whatever you ask to do if you don't understand it, right? Stop from doing a task, or it could be like, imagine you're late and I wanted to go to the movies and we missed the session. It's infuriating. We're not happy when that happens, okay? So, because we know that that is what creates tensions in the workplace and beyond, in your families as well, as it's always going to be those two reasons, it's important to understand the differences across cultures that could have an implication on how we deal with a person and how we deal with a task. Let's start with identity. My name is Vanessa Barros. Call me Vanessa, or my name is Dr. Barros, or my name is Barros Vanessa. In Muslim countries, in highly collectivist environments, you give your family name first, because what matters is your family. So what matters is less me, myself, and I than the collective, the group, the clan, where I come from, where I belong. So imagine that you come very individualistic to a meeting with a lot of autonomy, which usually is correlated with a lot of individualism, and you give your decisions or your points of view without even talking to your colleagues. Some other colleagues could think that you're extremely rude, that you are not thinking of the group, that you're not thinking of the team, that you should first discuss, agree, and then give your point of view. Status. If you don't call me by my title, or if you call me the wrong way, I could find myself disrespected. In Korea, in South Korea, you will let the person come in if they are superior to you in the elevator. Well, imagine how many names you need to know and how many positions you need to know in a new corporation when you get in, because nobody will make the mistake, because that would be a massive, massive issue and disrespect of status. Communication, do we communicate in a direct or indirect way? You have a very indirect way in India to say no, or to say anything, basically. It's to say, I understand. I understand can mean, I get it, it will never happen, I get it, I'll do it, I get it later, I get, and that's so you are very indirect in the way you communicate compared to other cultures that could sound to you a bit rude. So the way to determine that something is very direct or indirect is when we use the verb. The most direct way of asking you to walk a dog would be to say, walk the dog. Okay. In China, a mother or a parent to their child would say, the sun is shining and the dog is a bit in need of energy or of exercise. They would not give the instruction directly, and yet the child would totally understand. Okay. Finally, timing. Are we on time or not? In India, you've got variations of notions of time. When you think about the personal setting and organizing a birthday and inviting people for 2 p.m., you would not expect people to come at 2 p.m. It would almost be rude to come at 2 p.m. If you did that in Germany, people would show up at 2 p.m. And if you did that in Japan, if you were not 10 minutes early, you would already be late, okay? So those notions can really, really aggravate us in the workplace when it comes to achieving the task, for instance. And finally, processes. How we delegate, how we organize, those things can also vary and create massive miscommunication and difficulties when it comes to doing a task. So understand that in order to create that third culture, you are not the only one with your values. Everybody has theirs. We need to understand that and manage it. And we need to realize that the reason why we're doing it is to avoid those tensions of hitting the person or hitting the task. Okay? Now, why is it so difficult? Here comes the complicated part. It is difficult because we, as human beings, have something called a brain, and our brain loves the power of habit. Our brain loves to function as if we were on survival mode constantly. And in order for you to understand that, and that happens particularly for the 200 of you who are listening to this webinar, some of you might already doing texting or doing other stuff on your computer, on your phones. That means you're on automatic pilot. because you're not in full attention of one given task. As soon as you are on more than 2 tasks, you are doing A, B, A, B, A, B, even if you have the illusion that you are attending to 2 tasks, you are not. You're giving 50% attention to each, okay? So for those who are looking, I'm going to show you an image for a few seconds, and I want you to remember this sequence. And I want you to write on the chat whether you are absolutely convinced that you can remember this sequence. Attention, I'm going to count until 3, and then I'm going to show the sequence. 1, 2, 3. Here we go. That's it. Who believes that they can remember this sequence forever? Anybody? Some of you might have a very strong photographic memory, by the way. So it could be that some of you could deal with it. Last 3, exactly. So we have some that might have more confidence in it. Now, I'm going to give you a piece of instruction, and I promise you'll never forget that sequence again. However weird it seemed to you in the first place. Here it is. What I've done was simply draw as a first symbol the top hand quarter, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth. So now, if I tell you to remember, you'll have to go back to the grid, but as soon as you think of the grid, you'll be able to replace it and do it again. What is this? This is how we learn about anything in life. You didn't learn that there was an oak tree, a cherry tree, a pear tree. No, you learned that there's a tree, there's a trunk, there's branches, and there's leaves. That's what you learn. You learn in terms of schema. You learn in terms of short circuits. You learn what makes it easier, because otherwise you would have a brain overload that would make it totally impossible for you to survive, okay? What's the problem with that? Well, we survive, so that's great. But we do the same with human beings. And we assume that what we see is what the others see. So let me give you another exercise. Write to me on the chat what you see. Do you see an old lady or do you see a young lady? Ayushi, is the woman young or old? Now, those of you who answered one or the other, can you see the other one? If you see both, that's great. And the older lady would look like a bit of a witch. She's got her chin down. She's totally profiled. And for those who only saw the young lady, the chin of the young lady becomes the nose of the old lady. Exactly, Avinash. Old with a crooked nose. And some of you will only see the young lady. Maybe take a screen grab and try to make the exercise and have somebody show you. The young lady is looking backwards, and she's got a little feather on the top of her eyes. And the eye that you think is the eye of the old lady is her ear. Why am I showing you this image? Well, because across cultures, we're going to see what we're used to. And if I had spoken to you for an entire morning about old age people, more people than not would have seen the older lady. And so do not ever think that your view of the world is the view of the world. It's one view of the world. And here you're all amongst one culture, a very complex culture, but still you're, in one country. So imagine if you start changing parameters, changing stories, changing statistics in our lives. So our tendency is going to be to have the majority syndrome. We believe in stats. We have a norm. So everybody looks a certain way. Everybody believes in a certain number of things. For the longest time in Europe, people believed that the earth was flat. And the first one to say it's round was immediately aggressed and killed and murdered, because that was a big danger for the majority to be questioned. Okay? So let's not make that mistake. So go back to your mentee and tell me 3 words that you believe would define professionalism. Three words to define professionalism. Look at the variety of answers that you're already giving. Profitability compared to ethical, compared to teamwork, compared to helpfulness, ownership. And this is what you think is the norm. When we say he's so unprofessional or he's so professional, that means that we've got 3 words to define whether they are amongst those 3 or not. So this image and this variety of terms that you use should convince you by now that professionalism is not a standard. It's a personal point of view that you have on work. Yes, that will be shared by many in an organization, particularly if the culture of the organization is a strong one, but it's something that you need to negotiate every day with your colleagues because they might have a completely different one to deal with. So, if we go back, to this notion, it was a aha moment for me in my career. Why? Can you see my screen now? Yes. Why? Because I was convinced for the first 15 years of my career that what I'd been taught about professionalism was correct. And as some of you, punctuality was part of it. Democratic hierarchy was part of it. And suddenly I was working in Central Asia, I was working in South America, I was working in North America, and things were completely different. People were giving feedback differently. And 15 years after being brought up in strong companies that were of very much American or British origin, and therefore Western culture, I came back to another Western culture, France, and I looked at people around me. I was like, they're crazy. It's not me. It's not my way of doing things. And I felt they were all, bad professionals. And I had an epiphany. I was like, no, wait a second. You're talking to very, very brilliant people. And they are actually very good at what they do. They just do it in a very, very different way. And so I needed to adjust. So how do you practice your experience brain? The one that will stop you from making judgments and deciding that your views of professionalism is the right one and not another one. Well, I'll leave you with 4 strategies for today. The first one is the art of asking open questions. Forget about yes or no questions from now on. Those, particularly in an interdependent culture, will lead to a yes answer, which is not what you potentially want. What you want is the truth. What you want is the reality. What you want is the solution. Forget about judgmental questions, such as, don't you think you should have done that? Or how are you going to do this? It's not when you say those things, or why did you do this? It's not that you want to know. It's that you're really mad and you're telling them that's not good enough. Or diagnosis questions. Imagine you went to the movies and the first thing I say is, with whom? Maybe you didn't want to talk about who you were with, but maybe you wanted to talk about the film. So opening up your questions. So if I look at the following questions, try to avoid those and open up your register of questions. The second one is observation. On the chat, please tell me what you see. What do you see? Write, don't think too much, huh? Just write very quickly what you see. Brainstorming session, people discussing, people in a meeting, good discussion, group discussion, a meeting, casual, a group discussion. Now, listen to this next assignment that I'm giving you. What is that nobody could question about the way you're going to describe this scene? What is it that you can write to me that nobody could question about it? 5 people? Discussion, I don't know. But 5 people, yes. Some are younger than others. Or some are, they are of different age. There's one table, absolutely. There's papers on the table. There's a hand coming together at the end of the table. But anybody would say there's a leader, there's a sad person. What is the difference between the first exercise and the second one? The first one is that your narrative brain, the automatic mode, went into interpretation immediately. And I wanted you to go into observation because across cultures, what you observe is of a completely different notion. And the reasons why people do certain things across cultures is completely different. If you told me he made a smile gesture rather than he was happy, is very different. If you could give me, he made a smile gesture, I'll tell you, well, in Thailand, it doesn't mean anything. So therefore, I won't be understanding from what you described that there's a positive outcome or anything like that. I would just say it's neutral. Or if I was in another country where a smile is a very good sign, I would say, oh, wow, that was a good sign. So across cultures, you need to be in observation. So remember, open up your questions to humility questions. Make sure you observe rather than interpret. Take perspective all the time. When I asked you to write those terms on the screen to look at other people, it was less for you to write your values than to look at the other values. Put yourself in the shoes of the person who likes punctuality when you're not punctual. Put yourself in the shoes of the person who didn't get it because you were speaking a language that is foreign to them. What are they feeling? How are they feeling? And by reminding yourself of the others, you end up being able to realize, number one, that there's no victim and culprit. When there's tension, there's 2 people related to the tension, and you will understand further what is going on. And finally, emotional awareness. Try to know how you feel in the morning, in midday, and at night, and look at the day you've had. And the more aware you are of your emotions, the better you will be to handle others, but also yourself. When you have hot buttons, things that make you jump, that you hate, know about those hot buttons. If you're precious about certain topics, know about that, because when the buttons are going to be pressed, you're going to become angry. That's your problem. It's not anybody else's problem. Okay? So just to wrap it up, I wanted to show you a few examples of where you could go very, very wrong in marketing, in sales, in anywhere if you don't know about cultures. And maybe I'll just finish with this one example. A Coca-Cola salesman goes to the Middle East and he doesn't speak the language, and therefore he wants to present the benefit of Coca-Cola. You're very tired, you drink Coca-Cola and you're all energized. He doesn't sell a single bottle. What went wrong? Yeah, you could argue you can't even drink during Ramadan. Absolutely. Exactly. Reading right to left. If you are in the Middle East, the person was running, drank Coca-Cola, and dropped dead. Poison. Also, you could have Vanshab, I think that's very good. You could have that notion of imposing Western styles. It could be a question of casting. But here, the fundamental notion was they read from right to left. And therefore, the message that you wanted to come across did not come across at all. So that was that for today. Would we have any questions, any comments, any disagreements? I love disagreement. Anybody? Any curiosity related to your studies and how this soft skill is going to help you or help you navigate? Think about the fact that when you have different departments in an organization, those are different cultures. The finance people don't talk the same way as the marketing people, don't talk the same way as the commercial people, etc. So you're going to have to navigate, even within your own market, across very, very different ways of doing things, of approaching topics, and that's going to be fascinating. This cultural awareness is about curiosity. So when you go anywhere, try to read about the country. What are the enemies? What are the taboos? What are the things what is the most famous film? Look at the cinema. Whenever I travel around the world, and I've been to 50 plus countries, I always buy at the airport the book, the most famous novel of that country. By reading the literature of a country, you get to know so much. Coping in a new environment is about not expecting that the new environment is like the old one. Usually we bring our old habits, and that is going to be very problematic. And particularly when we change jobs, when we change schools, what they expected from you in the previous job is probably the opposite of what is expected from you the next job. So, and that is a big issue that happens in management in general. So try to be flexible and to change the pair of glasses. When I don't know if I gave that analogy, but sunglasses that you walk around with and you're looking for them, and somebody says, but they're on your nose. You've got that's what we do with culture. We have our sunglasses so much that we forget that we have them and that we have a filter to the reality. When you don't know about other people's culture, to break the ice, I would definitely ask candid questions. How do we greet in your country? How should I address you? What kind of contact is possible or not? What is it that I'm supposed to do here? Worst and best case scenarios you've encountered during your career, and how did you deal with them? A typical one that would drive me up the wall. When you run a global account, you have a global calendar. That would make sense for anybody, but there's a lot of Western managers and others that are so ethnocentric, meaning they think their norm is the norm, that they only think of their calendar. So when it's Diwali in their country, they don't think about something else happening elsewhere. And so one of the top sentences that I would get running global brands was a big CEO somewhere in the world telling me, Vanessa, it'd be great if you could do it before the holiday. What holiday are you talking to me about? Are you talking about Christmas? Because that person might have been of Christian religion, which case is the end of December. Or are you talking about the new year in China, beginning of February, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a really a sign of total disrespect of other cultures that I think we need to open up and stop doing. Best case scenario and best ways of addressing are people that on their websites show how they pronounce their names, explain to you how they feel, how they are, leaders that immediately say those rules and those values are important to me, so the way we're going to proceed is going to be that way. I don't believe that there's any other better way, but in this context, I suggest out of experience that we run things this way, and then teaches the person how to do it. Because if I were to tell a very hierarchical country to be completely autonomous, that doesn't mean anything. You need to explain how to do things. To be unaware of cultural is one thing, and to not know about it, but you need to be aware of what you see and communicate about it. I have another question here. How can we reconcile the discrepancy in ESG scores between companies like Tesla, known for sustainable innovation, and companies in traditional non-green industries such as Philip Morris International, considering the substantial impact ESG scores have on investment inflow? Here you're talking about much more macro politics, and I'm not going to dwell into it. What I can give you, however, is that in any company, and whatever the vision of the CEO, and I believe very much that the impulse of the leader is what matters when it comes to ecology as well, there can be a shadow culture. And so do not let yourself be impressed by the reputation of an extraordinary brand, and ask carefully how it is to work in that company before you join in. There were examples, for instance, at some point at Apple versus Microsoft, where Apple was a lot cooler and everybody wanted to go to Apple. But Apple was very, very difficult environment to work in, whereas IBM, for instance, would have been a much more friendly human environment. I'm not talking about today. I'm just saying years ago that would have been a discrepancy that would happen. So don't be fooled by overall scores and overall reputations. Try to talk to the people inside and see if the values of these people match yours. How to not offend their culture. Display who you are. In my culture, I do this thing. How would you address somebody? Think of hierarchy. If you were to talk about people who are older than you, in some countries, how is it? Is it okay to disagree? Is it okay to agree? Be the most conservative you can be in order to avoid a problem of correctness. And then it's always easier for me to say to you, don't call me ma'am, call me Vanessa, than if you were to call me Vanessa and I expect you to call me ma'am. That's going to be a wrong start for our relationship. But if you are more formal and you are more the degree of politeness, and that you try to observe what is going on. For instance, when it comes to contact, physical contact, I would invite you to never touch anybody until you see whether it's possible. There's places in the world where cross-gender, it's absolutely impossible. And I was teaching, and there was an Egyptian lady in the group a few weeks ago. And any example or any exercise that I had to do about holding hands, was impossible. And I knew that, and I had to play with it. But it would have been extremely offensive if any of you were to hug or hold her hand, or even worse, kissing like the French would do, sometimes even informally in a work setting. Welcoming countries. I think that, as I told you, the human nature is discriminatory by definition. So I don't think there's. I think there's countries such as your country, India, that are more extrovert, more lively in the sense of welcoming and displaying emotions and partying and that could be good for some people like me. I'm an extrovert. I like crowds. So I would find that very welcoming for myself. There's people who are a bit shyer and they would actually prefer structure. And then maybe a country like South Korea that is a bit more conformist or Japan would work for them better. So I don't think it's a matter of one country being better, not better, but more welcoming than another. It's really what are the values? And that's an important question you need to ask yourselves if you want to go into an international career. What are the values that are matched in the countries that you want to travel in? And are you going to feel okay? Because if you have to continuously play against your values to match the norm of the country, it's going to be very tiring psychologically and could lead to burnout. Value that unites different cultures. I don't believe in a value that unites different cultures. I believe in the fact that we have the same worth across cultures and the same potential. And so that's what is common to humanity, is this ability to come up with solutions, to think, to get out of trouble in a way. And so that is what makes the richness of humanity, absolutely. So if we were to wrap it all up, we had an hour together. We talked about the definition of that third culture, detecting cultures rather than bashing and thinking there's labels. That does not exist. Making sure you realize that you have your own values. They're very different from others, and you're going to have to negotiate that constantly. Professionalism is not a standard. It's a personal definition that you have, and you need to negotiate that in organizations. The HOPE, think of that acronym: humble inquiry, observation, perspective taking, and emotional awareness, to fight this tendency of our, automatic brain, the narrative brain, the quick brain, because that one is very judgmental. It's going to be very discriminatory, and it's going to be very quick at deciding who they like or not. And we need to just pause a little bit for that. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Dr. Vanessa. I think it was really an eye-opener session for the students, because they're very soon going to join the campus and going to meet a diverse set of, culture, religion, experience, profession. And this session, I think, is really an eye-opener. So now they know when they come, how do they break the ice with the classmates and make a lot of friends, network with their, peers and with their seniors. So thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am, for accepting our invite and
thank you for having
being here for us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Doctor.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, students.
Good luck, all the students, and enjoy your ride at IMT and beyond.